Hello, my name is Avery Miller, and my project is titled From Revenue to Resilience: Evaluating Fiscal Restructuring, Accountability, and Investment Trade-offs under Washington's Climate Commitment Act. My host organization through which I conducted this research was Puget Sound Partnership. To begin, my research examines how Washington's Climate Commitment Act, or CCA, is shifting from an early period of high revenue towards a more constrained fiscal future. The CCA is Washington's cap and invest policy designed to help the state meet its legally required greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. Washington must reduce total greenhouse gas emissions by 45% below 1990 levels by 2030, 60% by 2040, and 95% by 2050. Under this system, large polluters purchase carbon allowances through auctions held by the Department of Ecology, where the overall capital emissions or available allowances declines over time. The revenue generated from these auctions is then appropriated by the legislature for projects related to climate change impacts, decarbonization, and environmental resilience. Before 2026, CCA revenue was distributed across 5 separate accounts, each with its own spending rules and policy purpose. The figure to the far left shows this distribution by account under the old structure. The 5 accounts that existed included SARA for transportation, AQHDIA for air quality and health, and the climate investment account, which served as a pass-through to distribute 25% to natural climate solutions account projects for natural resource types projects, and 75% to the Climate Commitment Act, which served as the most flexible account for spending related to both capital and operating budgets. The introduction of House Bill 2251 this legislative session changes the design of CCA account structure to become more consolidated. These accounts are important because they shape which types of projects could receive funding and help define the boundaries of CCA investment. Additionally, early CCA revenue was unusually high, especially during the 2023 to 2025 biennium, when Department of Ecology's revenue was influenced by high auction revenue and APCR-related revenue. According to Ecology's December 2025 auction forecast, revenues from the auctions are estimated to be $832.2 million higher over the 2023 to 25 period and the 2027 to 29 period than expected when the 2025 to 27 budget was adopted. For context, one of the central points of my research is that early CCA revenue should not necessarily be treated as a stable long-term baseline. As projected revenue decreases in future years, there will likely be more competition among climate project areas for a smaller pool of money. This revenue decline does not automatically mean that the CCA is failing. In fact, declining revenue can partially reflect the policy working as intended, because the emissions cap is designed to tighten over time. However, this creates a fiscal challenge when ongoing spending obligations remain in place while available revenue decreases. If the state continues to rely on CCA revenue for reoccurring operating, administrative, wage, benefit, or legal costs, then Washington may face a mismatch between the original policy design of the CCA and the budgetary decisions being made through the legislative appropriations. To examine what policy implications can be drawn from the CCA, I developed 2 research questions. 1, how does the role of decreasing revenue shape the future of funding for projects under the CCA? And in what way does House Bill 2251 change the outcome of CCA spending through alteration to account structure? For the methodology, I used a document-based policy analysis and a budget tracing approach. First, I converted Ecology's CCA revenue forecast from fiscal year totals into biennial totals so they could align with Washington's 2-year budget cycles. I then applied HB 2251's distribution rules to compare past and future CCA spending allocations. The distribution of revenue is narrowed down to 3 accounts now instead of 5, and those 3 are transportation, operating, and capital. In addition, I tracked CCA appropriations by account and spending category using the enacted operating and capital budgets for the 2023 to 25 biennium and the 2025 to 27 biennium. This allowed me to examine how CCA revenue moves from auction proceeds into legislative spending decisions, and how the structure of accounts affects the final outcome of project funding. For my results, one of the most important findings was that HB 2251 changes the way CCA revenue is distributed by prioritizing predictable operating and administrative costs before more flexible project spending. Under the new structure, the first $25 million in annual CCA revenue, adjusted for inflation, is directed into a new operating account before the other distributions occur. My research identified $16.4 million in new operational items funded by CCA revenue for the 2025 to 27 biennium, including wage increases, health insurance rate adjustments, and legal services. These projects were not found to have any specific account attached to them, which is why I've categorized them separately. This type of spending is not inherently negative because agencies need staffing, legal, and administrative capacity to implement climate programs effectively. However, it does show that account structure matters and that legislative prioritization matters, even more when revenue becomes constrained. The figures on the poster help illustrate this shift. The first figure shows the projected drop-off in CCA revenue and the expected change in the balance between capital and operational spending after House Bill 2251 is implemented. You can see how the proportion between capital and operating spending narrows over time. The second figure shows changes in appropriations across CCA accounts over time, including the emergence of a new operational spending category by the 2025 to 27 biennium. Together, these figures show that CCA spending is not only shaped by how much revenue the program generates, but also by how much the legislature chooses to structure and prioritize that revenue once it enters the budget process. For my significance, next steps, and policy suggestions, I say that the CCA is still a new policy, and the unpredictability of market-based auction revenue further adds to this complexity associated with predicting CCA outcomes. However, based on these findings, my policy suggestions focus on protecting the climate investment purpose of CCA while improving fiscal transparency. As Washington faces broader budget deficits, lawmakers should clarify which CCA dollars are reserved specifically for climate projects and which dollars may be used for broader operational needs. The state should also plan for future uncertainty related to a potential linkage with Quebec and California's carbon market, since linked markets may affect allowance prices, auction demand, and long-term revenue expectations. Finally, Washington should avoid over-reliance on temporary or declining revenue for ongoing costs and should strengthen budget transparency by clearly identifying which CCA account funds each appropriation, especially when the spending supports operational rather than project-based purposes. Thank you.